Idris Reese had not said a single word in 41 days, and I had begun to believe he never would again. I counted them, those days, the way a man counts anything he cannot fix. From my own bed 3 feet from his, where I lay with my ruined right arm strapped across my chest, watching him sit by the window, with his ruined eyes turned toward a sea he could no longer see. We had both come up out of the Cum dairy pit on the same black morning, though not by the same door. A fire-damp blast had taken the roof down in the number 4 heading, and it had taken my arm's strength and Idris's sight and 4 other men's lives entire, and it had left the rest of us here, at Penralt, a convalescent home for injured miners set on the cliffs above a gray Welsh bay, to mend what could be mended and to learn to carry what could not. Penralt itself was a long stone house that had once belonged to a shipping man, given over now to the mining company for its broken, with tall windows that let in more sea light than any sick room I had known before, and a smell of carbolic soap and salt that never quite left the corridors. I spent my mornings in a chair by that same window, working my bad fingers open and shut around a rolled bandage, counting my small victories the way other men count coin. It was slow work, recovering. I had time enough to watch my neighbor and wonder at him. I had my letters still, and my legs, and a tongue that worked even if my hand did not. Idris had none of that comfort. He had been a singer before the pit took his eyes. I was told this by the other men, for I had not known him below ground. A big, gentle man, with a voice that used to carry a hymn clean over the noise of the cage and the wheel. Now he sat with his bandaged face toward the window glass, and he did not sing, and he did not speak. And when his wife came on the Tuesday coach from the valley and took his hand and said his name 3 times, softly, he only sat. Her name was Mare. She was a slight woman, with a Coal Town roughness in her hands, and a patience in her that frightened me a little, because I could see what it was costing her to keep it. She would come, and she would talk to him of the garden, and the chapel, and the neighbor's new baby, and she would hum sometimes, low under her breath, a tune I did not know, and still he sat, staring at nothing with his bandaged eyes. And when the coach came for her again, she would kiss his knuckles and go, and something in the room would go out with her like a lamp turned down. They had married young, one of the other men told me once, over cards on a rainy evening, married at 19 and 20, against both families' better counsel, and raised 2 boys and a girl in a 2-room cottage on the strength of Idris's wages and Mare's fierce economy, and had thought themselves, before the explosion, ordinary and fortunate in equal measure. It was that ordinary fortune the pit had taken from them as surely as it had taken his sight, and I do not think any of us fully understood, in those early weeks, that it was possible to grieve a life that had not ended, only changed beyond recognizing. The matron, a broad, no-nonsense woman named Mrs. Prothero, had tried what she knew. She had brought the chapel minister and a doctor down from Cardiff, and even, once, Idris's old buddy from the coalface, a cheerful man named Ianto, who had wept in the corridor afterward because nothing he said had reached him either. Penralt was good at mending bone and lung. It had no remedy for a man who had decided, in whatever silent country grief had taken him to, not to come back. That was the state of things when Enid Vaughan arrived on a Thursday in her sensible gray coat, carrying a small case, and a great deal more calm than any 23-year-old had any right to. She had come from Cardiff, sent by some hospital board that had begun, in those last years before the old century's habits fully gave way, to believe that music might do for a broken man what medicine could not finish. She was to be at Penralt 3 afternoons a week, the matron told us at supper, to play for the men in the day room, and to see, in her words, whether it eased anyone. Half the ward laughed at the notion. I confess I was among them. We had seen doctors and ministers and old buddies fail. I did not see what a slip of a girl and an upright piano could do that they had not. I changed my mind the first afternoon I watched her work, though not because of Idris. Not yet. She came into the day room where 6 or 8 of us sat with our various wounds, and she did not fuss over anyone, did not ask us how we were feeling in that soft voice people use on the broken. She simply sat at the old piano that stood against the veranda wall, its wood gone silvery with salt air, and she played a country air, plain and clean, and she watched us while she played the way a good shepherd watches a flock, not staring, just aware. When old Di Bevan, who had lost a foot and most of his temper besides, began drumming his fingers on his chair arm in time, she smiled without looking up, as though she had been waiting for exactly that. She noticed Idris on her second visit. He had been wheeled out onto the veranda for the sea air, as he was most fine afternoons, and he sat there through her whole recital, unmoving, while every other man in earshot at least turned his head. I watched her watch him. She did not go to him. She only asked, afterward, quietly, who he was. I told her what I knew, which was little enough. His name, his village, the blast, his wife's Tuesday visits, the singing voice he no longer used. She asked me, was he always so still? And I said he had not spoken one word since I had known him. Not one, not even his own name. And before, she said, what was he? Before the pit? A tenor, I said. They say he'd have sung in Cardiff, in a proper hall, if he hadn't married young and gone down the mine like his father. I did not know why I told her that last part. It seemed, somehow, the important part. She thanked me and went back to her piano, and I thought that would be the end of her interest. Another well-meaning visitor added to the list of those who had tried and been turned away by his silence. I was wrong about that, as I was wrong about a good many things that spring. She began coming to sit with Mare on the Tuesdays. I know this because I saw them together on the veranda, the young nurse and the miner's wife, heads bent close, and once I saw Mare take Enid's hand, the way a woman takes the hand of somebody she has decided to trust. I did not hear what passed between them until later, when Enid told it to me herself, in the plain, unhurried way she told most things. Mare had a lullaby. It was no secret, she said. Half the valley knew it, an old Welsh cradle song called Suogan, soft as a held breath, the kind of tune sung over cots since before anyone living could remember. But Mare had made it her own in one particular way. She had hummed it to Idris himself, she confessed, blushing, on the long nights after their own children came, when he could not sleep for the ache in his back from the coal face, and again, more than once, in the dark hours after the first months of their marriage, when he had been afraid of something he never named to her. It was not a song for babies only, in their house. It was the sound of Mare's voice telling him, without needing words, that he was not alone in whatever dark had hold of him. She hummed it for him the first day she visited him here, Enid told me, the Tuesday after the explosion. She says he didn't move. She has stopped trying it since. She thought it made no difference, and she couldn't bear to keep failing at the one thing she thought might reach him. I asked her, plainly, whether she meant to play it. I mean to try, she said. Not today. He isn't ready to hear it from a stranger's hands yet, and neither, I think, is she ready to watch it fail again, but soon. She spent the better part of 2 weeks preparing for what seemed, on its face, a small thing, learning 6 or 7 simple verses of a Welsh cradle tune. But I watched her at the piano in the evenings after the other men had gone to their beds, working the melody over slowly, testing where to let it breathe, where to let the left hand fall soft as a hand smoothing a blanket. And I understood she was not merely learning notes. She asked Mare to hum it for her a dozen times, so she would have not the printed tune but the true one, the one shaped by a particular woman's voice, in a particular dark kitchen years before. She asked what words Idris used to say back to her, if any, when she sang it, and Mare told her he used to murmur, "There now, Cariad, there now," into her hair, which was nothing to do with the song at all, and everything to do with the two of them together. And Enid folded that answer away, like something precious, and did not explain what she meant to do with it. The Tuesday she chose was a fine one, bright and mild, with the tide out, and the gulls loud over the rocks below the veranda, and Mare on the afternoon coach as always, her basket of small things, a clean shirt, a jar of preserves, a letter from their eldest boy, set on her lap the whole ride down, the way I imagined she had carried it every Tuesday for 41 weeks, hoping this would be the day it mattered to him that she had brought it. We were gathered in the day room, most of us, because word had gone quietly round the ward that the young nurse meant to try something with Idris that afternoon, and even men with their own grief enough to carry, wanted to be there for his. Mrs. Prothero stood by the door with her arms folded, not stopping it, not quite endorsing it either. Mare sat in the chair beside Idris's, holding his hand as she always did, her face arranged into the same patient calm I had watched her wear for weeks, though I could see now what it cost her. The small tremor in her jaw, the way her thumb moved over his knuckles without stopping. Enid did not announce anything. She simply sat down at the piano, adjusted the stool, folded her hands in her lap for one long moment of stillness, and let the room settle around her, the way a held breath settles a room. The sea sound came in soft, through the open veranda doors. Somewhere below, a gull cried once and went quiet. Then she began. She did not attack the tune. She let it arrive, the first notes so quiet I had to lean forward in my chair to be certain the piano had spoken at all. A slow, rocking figure in the left hand, gentle as a boat found its motion, and over it, in the right, the melody itself rising like something remembered rather than played. It was simple, that tune. Simpler than anything a concert hall would have asked of her. And that simplicity was exactly its power. There was no ornament in it, no display. Every phrase curved the way a mother's arm curves around a child, and she shaped each one with a patience that made the whole room fall still. Even Di Bevan, who could not sit through a hymn without fidgeting, gone motionless in his chair. She played the first verse through once, softly, and I watched Idris's bandaged face for any change, and saw none, and my chest tightened with the old dread that this, too, would fail, that we would watch Mare's basket sit unopened on her lap for another Tuesday. Then Enid began to hum. She hummed it low, under the melody, the way Mare must have hummed it in that dark kitchen years before, not performing the tune but simply being inside it, and something in the quality of the sound changed the room entirely. It was no longer a recital. It was a voice speaking to one man alone. She let the second verse swell just slightly, the smallest lift in the phrase where the old words spoke of angels keeping watch through the night, her fingers finding a warmth in the middle of the keyboard that the salt-worn old piano gave up gladly, as though it too remembered being sung to once. The melody climbed, held, and settled again, patient, unhurried, certain of where it was going. I saw Mare's hand tighten on Idris's. I saw his head, which had not turned toward any sound in 41 days, tilt very slightly toward the piano. The light on the veranda had gone that particular gold it takes on late in a Welsh afternoon, low over the water and warm on every face turned toward it, and it seemed to me, though I know a man's grief is not so easily coaxed by weather, that even the room itself had softened to meet her, the salt air stirring the curtain at the open door, the old piano's strings ringing a little longer in that hush than I had ever heard them ring before. Enid did not stop, did not so much as glance up, though I am certain she saw it too, the way a good shepherd sees without staring. She let the third verse arrive softer than the two before it, drawing the room in rather than reaching out to it, her right hand tracing the melody down into its lowest tender phrase, the one that in the Old Welsh speaks of sleep coming gentle as the tide. And it was here, in that hush, that Idris Rees's face began, unmistakably, to change. It was not sudden. It was the way morning comes over water, so slow you cannot name the moment dark became light, only that it has. The set line of his jaw eased. His hand, which had lain slack in his wife's for 41 days, closed slowly around her fingers. And beneath the bandages that hid his ruined eyes, something moved in the muscles of his face that every one of us in that room recognized, because we had none of us seen it on him since the pit. The beginning, unmistakable and entire, of a smile. Enid brought the tune to its close the way she had begun it, without flourish, letting the final phrase fall away into 3 long chords, each one softer than the last, until the last of them was barely more than the piano breathing, and then silence, and the sea sound filling the room again where the melody had been. No one moved, no one dared, and into that silence, Idris Rees said, in a voice gone rough and unused as an old gate hinge, the first words I had heard him speak in 41 days.
"Mare,"
he said.
"Cariad, is that you singing?"
Mare Rees made a sound I have no proper word for, half a sob and half a laugh, and pressed his hand to her wet cheek, and said yes, yes, It was her. She was there. She had never once stopped coming. And he turned his bandaged face fully toward her voice, as though he could see her after all, and said her name again, over and over, like a man saying a word in a language he had feared he'd forgotten. Enid sat very still at the piano with her hands in her lap, not turning around, giving them the room to have that moment without an audience's eyes on it, though every one of us in that day room was weeping without shame, myself included, my good hand pressed hard against my mouth. It was Mrs. Prothero, of all people, who broke first, crossing the room in 3 long strides to kneel by Idris's chair and take his other hand and say his name too, as though she needed to hear him answer her as well. And he did, quiet and wondering. "I'm here, Mrs. Prothero. I believe I'm here." Idris asked, before the afternoon was out, who had played for him, and Enid came and knelt by his chair the way the matron had, and told him her name, and he reached out and found her hand, and held it a moment, the way a man holds something he means to remember, and said only, "Thank you for bringing her voice back to me." He did not mean Enid's voice. We all understood that. He meant the years of it, folded inside that old cradle song, carried across whatever dark country he had gone into, and set down gently at his feet until he found his own way home. Idris did not leave his silence behind all at once, but he spoke more each day that followed, first only to Mare and to Mrs. Prothero, then to Ianto when he came again, and by midsummer he had begun to hum under his breath while the orderlies wheeled him out for his morning air, the same low cradle tune, over and over, as though teaching it back to himself one phrase at a time. By August he was singing again in earnest, low at first, and then, on the day his youngest boy came down on the coach with his mother, full-voiced, so that the whole day room fell quiet to listen the way it had for Enid, that Tuesday in spring. He never got his sight back. He got something else back instead, and I watched it happen from the bed 3 feet from his, and I have never since doubted that a song, carried carefully enough in the right hands, can find a man wherever his grief has taken him and walk him gently home. I have thought often in the months since of that hush before the first note, when none of us knew whether a simple tune played by a stranger's hands could reach a man that ministers and doctors and old friends could not. I think now that it was never really the piano that reached him. It was his wife's voice, held safe inside the music long enough for him to hear it again, and a young woman patient enough to go looking for exactly the right song, and steady enough to play it soft as breath until a silent man remembered he still had a voice of his own, and used it, at last, to say her name.